They found the boat. That was the easy part. 3,000 miles from where it disappeared. 10 years later, still intact. And next to it, a grave. Shallow, marked with stones. One of the 5 men who went missing. But only one. Someone buried him. Someone made the crossing, found the body, laid the stones, and then vanished again. Nobody knows who, nobody knows how, nobody knows why only one came home.
February 11th, 1979. Hilo, Hawaii. A Saturday morning. The kind of morning that makes you believe nothing bad can happen. Blue sky, warm air, the smell of salt and sunscreen and outboard motor fuel. 5 men launched a small Boston whaler called the Sarah Joe into Hilo Bay. Their names? Peter Hanchett, Ralph Malakaini, Scott Moorman, Benjamin Kalama, and Patrick Wosner. Ages ranging from their 20s to early 30s. Local men, men who knew these waters. They were going fishing. They told people they'd be back by evening. By afternoon, a storm had developed, fast, unexpected, the kind the Pacific builds without warning. Winds rising, seas turning white. The Coast Guard was notified when the Sarah Joe didn't return at dusk. They searched for 2 weeks. Ships, aircraft, a coordinated effort across hundreds of square miles of open ocean. Nothing. No wreckage, no life vests, no flares fired, no oil slick. 5 men, a boat, gone. The families were told what families are always told in these situations. Presumed lost at sea. That was 1979. Now, remember that phrase, presumed lost at sea. We'll come back to it. For the next 10 years, the Sarah Joe existed only in the memories of the people who loved those 5 men. The case was officially closed. The names were added to the long, quiet list of those the Pacific had taken and kept. Life moved on, the way it always does. And then, in September of 1988, a marine biologist named John Naughton was conducting a survey of Taongi Atoll. Taongi, also called Bokak, is one of the most remote places on Earth, a ring of coral and sand in the northern Marshall Islands, roughly 3,200 miles southwest of Hilo. No permanent population, no infrastructure, visited only occasionally by researchers. Naughton was walking the atoll's shoreline when he saw it. A small boat, half buried in sand, mostly intact. He noted the registration, he recorded the condition, he took photographs. Back in Honolulu, someone ran the numbers. The boat was the Sarah Joe, missing for 9 years, found 3,200 miles from home. But that, as strange as it was not the detail that stopped everyone cold. The detail was what Naughton found next to the boat. A grave. Shallow, hand-dug in the coral sand, covered with flat stones, arranged deliberately, not scattered, not random, arranged. Inside, partial human remains, later identified through dental records as Scott Moorman, one of the 5 men who had left Hilo in 1979. He had made it to Taongi. Someone had buried him there. And here is the question that has never been answered. Who?
Investigators, researchers, and maritime historians have spent decades building theories around the Sarah Joe. 3 of them are worth examining closely, because each one explains part of what happened, and each one leaves something that cannot be explained at all. Theory 1. They survived the storm and drifted. The most rational starting point. The Pacific has powerful currents. A small boat with no engine or a disabled engine could, theoretically, be carried thousands of miles over months or years. This explains how the boat reached Taongi, but it doesn't explain the grave. A drifting, unmanned vessel doesn't bury its dead. Something alive reached that atoll, someone with enough strength, enough intention, enough humanity left to gather stones and place them over a body. Theory 1 tells us how the boot got there. It says nothing about the grave. Theory 2. Some of the men survived long enough to reach the atoll. This is the theory most investigators lean toward for the burial itself. The storm, rather than killing all 5 immediately, may have left some alive on the damaged boat. They drifted, over weeks, maybe months. Scott Moorman died during the crossing, illness, exposure, injury. The others buried him, and then also died, or left. This theory requires that 4 people survived long enough to perform a burial and then disappeared so completely that no trace of them was ever found on or near the atoll. No additional remains, no other signs of habitation, no tools, no shelters, no fire rings. Just one grave, just one set of stones. As if only one person was worth burying, or as if only one person had someone left to bury them. Theory 3. Someone else buried Scott Moorman. This is the theory nobody wants to say aloud because it opens a door that doesn't close easily. Taongi Atoll, while remote, is not completely outside human reach. Fishing vessels from the Marshall Islands occasionally pass through the area. It is theoretically possible that local fishermen found the wreck, found a body, and performed a burial out of respect. But no one has ever come forward to claim this. No fishing crew, no island community, no account, oral or recorded, of anyone finding a dead man on Taongi and burying him before Naughton's 1988 survey. And there is one more problem with this theory. The grave was not marked in any local tradition. The stone arrangement was not consistent with any Marshall Islands burial custom that anthropologists have been able to identify. It looked, to those who studied it, like something improvised, something done by someone who didn't know the right way to bury a person, but knew they had to try. That detail, the improvised stones, becomes important later. Here is the question that all 3 theories fail to answer. A survey team visited Taongi Atoll in 1981, 2 years after the Sarah Joe disappeared. They found no boat, no grave, nothing. Which means the Sarah Joe arrived at Taongi after 1981. The boat drifted for at least 2 years before reaching the island. 2 years on the open Pacific. Was anyone still alive on it? The Marshall Islands have a relationship with the ocean that most of the world cannot fully imagine. For the people of this region, the sea is not backdrop, it is not scenery. It is the primary fact of existence, the thing that gives life and takes it, that connects islands separated by hundreds of miles of open water. In this context, the story of a boat arriving empty on a remote atoll is not simply a maritime mystery. It carries a different weight. Researchers who worked in the northern Marshall Islands in the years after the Sarah Joe discovery spoke with local navigators, men whose families had sailed these waters for generations, using only stars, currents, and the feel of the swells beneath a hull. One navigator, an elder from Majuro Atoll, whose name was recorded only as TK in the researcher's notes, described a concept his community held about certain stretches of open water in the northern Pacific. He called them, loosely translated, the paths that take and don't give back. Currents so powerful, so consistent in their direction, that anything caught in them will travel thousands of miles with no possibility of return. He said his grandfather had described boats found on Taongi before, not often, but not never. Boats from places so distant that no one could explain how they arrived. And he said something that the researcher recorded carefully because it did not fit any nautical explanation they had considered. He said the boats that arrived at Taongi sometimes arrived with things still inside them: food, water containers, personal objects, as if whoever had been on them had stepped off and simply continued somewhere else. Whether that is metaphor or memory or something else entirely, the researcher could not say. There is one other account worth noting. A Hawaiian fisherman, a man who had known Peter Hanchett, one of the five, gave a single interview to a local paper in 1989 after the discovery became public. He said he had always believed some of them made it, not because of evidence, not because of logic, because of the way Peter talked about the ocean. He said Peter treated the sea like it owed him nothing and gave him everything, that a man like that, a man that honest about the water, would find a way. And then he said something quietly, almost to himself, that the journalist caught and printed. Someone buried Scott. That means someone was still there to do it. That means Peter made it at least that far. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Remember the improvised stones we mentioned, the grave markers that matched no known burial tradition? Here is what that detail means. It means whoever built that grave was not from the Marshall Islands. It means they were improvising. It means they were far from home. And they were alone.
Somewhere on the Pacific, late 1979 or 1980, the math is uncertain. The ocean kept no calendar. Peter found the current on the 43rd day, or maybe the 50th. The marks on the hull had become difficult to read. The knife slipped some days when his hands were too weak to grip properly. He had stopped counting after Scott. The Sarah Joe drifted south-southwest, which was not where Peter wanted to go, but the ocean had stopped caring what Peter wanted somewhere around day 20. The boat smelled of salt and something older now, something Peter did not name. He sat at the stern, face burned dark, lips cracked to bleeding, and watched the horizon the way a man watches something he no longer expects to change. Ralph had gone on the 17th day, Benjamin on the 28th. Patrick had lasted longer than anyone expected, stronger than he looked. Patrick had always been stronger than he looked. It had been only the two of them, Peter and Scott, for what felt like a season. They didn't talk much by then. Words cost too much. But in the evenings, when the sun dropped and the air cooled enough to feel like mercy, Scott would hum. Not any song Peter recognized, just a sound, a human sound, proof that something alive was still there. Scott stopped humming on a Tuesday. He was sure it was a Tuesday, though he couldn't have explained why. The island appeared on a morning that felt no different from any other morning. Low, green at the center, white sand, the coral ring of an atoll barely lifting above the waterline. Peter did not celebrate. He was past celebrating. He maneuvered the boat as best he could, the motor long dead, one oar left, and grounded the Sarah Joe in the shallows. He sat there for a long time, just sat. Then he got out. The sand was hot under his feet, a sensation so ordinary, so human, that it broke something open in his chest. He stood there for a moment, breathing. Then he turned back to the boat. He found the flattest stones he could. It took most of the day. He was slow, his body was slow, but he was methodical. He had always been methodical. He did not know the right way to do this. He had never buried anyone before. He chose a spot above the tide line, close to the boat, in the shade of the low scrub that grew at the atoll's center. He dug with his hands where the sand was soft, and with a piece of driftwood where it turned to harder coral. He laid Scott down carefully. He covered him with the flat stones, arranged them, thought about whether he should say something. said nothing. Some things don't fit into words. Peter Hanchett spent some time on Taongi Atoll after the burial. How long, no one can say. The island offered coconuts, rainwater, fish in the shallows, enough to survive on, for a while. And then? The researchers who surveyed Taongi in 1988 found one grave, one set of stones, one set of remains. They found no evidence of any other person having been there, no shelter, no tools, no second grave, no trace of Peter Hanchett, no trace of Ralph, or Benjamin, or Patrick, just the boat, and the grave, and the Pacific, enormous, indifferent, keeping its secrets in the dark below the keel.
The remains of Scott Moorman were returned to Hawaii in 1988 and given a proper burial. His family, who had spent 9 years without a body to mourn over, finally had a place to stand. The Sarah Joe was left on Taongi Atoll. It may still be there, or what remains of it. The Pacific breaks things down slowly but completely. The 4 other men, Peter Hanchett, Ralph Malayakani, Benjamin Kalama, Patrick Woosner, were never found. No remains, no confirmed sightings, no accounts. In the years following the discovery, investigators re-examined every piece of available evidence. The current patterns were modeled, the drift time was calculated, the condition of the boat was analyzed for clues about how long it had been at sea before reaching the atoll. The conclusion? The Sarah Joe had been adrift for somewhere between 1 and 3 years before grounding on Taongi. 1 to 3 years. That is a long time to be on an open boat. It is also, theoretically, long enough to survive. No one has ever explained the grave satisfactorily. The official position, if there is one, is that some of the men survived long enough to reach the atoll and buried Moorman before dying there themselves, with their remains either buried elsewhere on the atoll in locations not found or carried away by the ocean. This is possible. It is also possible that someone survived long enough to leave Taongi. The Marshall Islands are dotted with atolls, some inhabited, some not, some visited by fishing boats operating outside any formal record. The ocean that took the Sarah Joe connects thousands of islands. It is not impossible that someone found their way to one of them. It is just that no one ever came back to say so. The detail that stays with everyone who studies this case, the detail that no theory absorbs cleanly, is the arrangement of the stones. Careful, deliberate, time-consuming. The work of someone who had enough left in them to care. You do not arrange stones like that if you are hours from death. You do not take that kind of time if you have nothing left. You arrange stones like that if you intend to leave, if you want the grave to last, if you want someone, someday, to find it and understand what it means. Someone did. It just took 9 years. The Pacific is the largest body of water on Earth. It covers more surface area than all the land on this planet combined. It has swallowed ships, fleets, entire chapters of human history. It gave back the Sarah Joe. It kept everything else. Next week on The Cube of Mysteries, a lighthouse keeper, a locked door, and a ship full of passengers who saw something in the water and refused to describe what it was. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss this one.